Welcome back, everybody, to Confluence of Worlds with Bryan Rector. And I am so overjoyed to be having this conversation with Joshua Langford, who many of you will know as being a mainstay and somebody who just is all over in terms of legacy and in terms of understanding of Michigan State basketball, Michigan State University in a multitude of capacities in the Lansing area. And so this one is very special to me because I, being from Portland, Oregon, from the West Coast, did not have a deep understanding of Michigan State and what it had to offer. But my understanding originated from Michigan State athletics and Michigan State sports. And conveniently, this all occurred right around the time where Josh was being recruited by Michigan State, considering other
Mhm,
schools, winning the McDonald's All American, or attending, I should say, winning
mhm,
the player of the year in high school, and
mhm.
accomplishing these things. And so, for me, having grown up with that understanding and now seeing what Josh is up to with, as we'll get into, stints with Big Ten Network, moving back to Alabama to teach Bible classes and coach high
Mhm.
school basketball at his alma mater, which I find so unique and so uplifting. And this conversation that he and I have been able to foster off camera, I can't wait for the conversation that you folks will be privy to, the insight and the teachings. Because, folks, he has made points to me in my learnings and my understandings of even my own show and some symbolism that I will just hope emanates amongst you guys. And so that's where we are. We're at Confluence of Worlds, Season 2, Episode 3. This is our 12th show, and it's the first show after we had Michigan State Big Ten champion and future graduate transfer, Jivana Lobovich, who is headed to Alabama, which I found ironic given that our guest, Joshua Langford, is from Alabama and also is back in Alabama teaching and coaching. So, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show. I cannot
Yeah.
believe that we're doing this. This has been something that I've reflected on and prayed about myself, and just it's almost a little bit hard to comprehend that we're here and that we're able to have this conversation. So I first want to lead you into the talk about being a part of Michigan State, but then
Mhm,
separating and deciding to move
mhm,
back to Alabama and begin this new
mhm,
chapter, these new endeavors. I want to know what went into this decision that was made in, I believe you were saying July, and
mhm,
how has it gone for you thus far as we've rounded into 2024? How is
mhm.
coaching? How is teaching? Tell me a little bit about this new chapter and what you've experienced.
Yeah, man. First of all, thank you for the compliments. Thank you for having me on the show. Um, like you said, I mean, we've talked a little bit before, and it's just exciting to be able to be a part of what God is doing through your show. But so I I will answer that question by starting with my job that I got after I graduated from Michigan State. And so my first job after I graduated from Michigan State was actually at Michigan State, and it was in the College of Business, and it was in a department called the Multicultural Business Program within the College of Business. And I guess my time there and working under Ed Tillett, his full name is Edmund Tillett, but he goes by Ed. And then I had a few other uh, team members that I was working with that were, mentoring me and working with me and really understanding that they were very empathetic to the fact that this was my first time being in the workforce. And so it was like everybody took me under their wing, excuse me, and I was like the little brother in the department. So I think working there really ignited a passion on the inside of me that was really already there. But I think being in an environment actually helped me become more aware of it. But the passion to like mentor and teach and coach, not just from an athletic standpoint, but just from a life standpoint, the generations coming behind me. And so I got to do a little bit of that when I was working at MVP. Um, and so out of that, I just, I think what it did for me, Bryan, it just helped me get a better awareness of myself. Um, and so from that standpoint, I was like, okay, this is something that I feel like I can do for the rest of my life, maybe in different ways, but I feel like I can do this for the rest of my life. I remember people asking me, do you see yourself doing uh, anything other than what you're doing now? And I was like, I mean, I see myself staying in this particular like vein of coaching and teaching and mentoring and that vein. I just saw myself maybe going and doing it more and more in different ways. Does that make sense?
It does.
Um,
It does.
yeah. So I was actually finishing up my second school year at MVP, and I got a call from my alma mater, Madison Academy, the high school that I graduated from. And actually, not a call, I got a text from the head coach, just to be even more detailed. The head coach, he texted me and he was like, hey, man, would you ever consider coming back to Huntsville and coaching here? And because at that time when he texted me, that was actually his first year. So at that time, he was trying to, build a good team around him and put and get some good pieces that he felt like he could work with and develop like a really good culture or help him develop a good culture when it came to the basketball program at Madison Academy, or at least maintain the culture because before he became coach, the coach that was there was my head coach and he had really established a good culture. So um, Tom was really trying to, and Tom is the head coach now. Tom is really trying to, establish a good culture. And so in that, he was reaching out to me. And I think this is just a testament to just how he really will orchestrate our paths. So literally before he texted me, I was just in my own, prayer time with God. And I just felt like God had put Madison Academy on my heart. And he was saying that he wanted me to, to give what the stuff that he's put in me, like the things that I was doing at MVP and the things that I was doing. MVP is the job that I got at the department that I worked at after Michigan State, just to give you context. If I say MVP, that's what I'm referring to. And so I felt like what God was saying was that he wanted me to go to Madison Academy and basically, in so many ways, do there what I was currently doing at MVP in the multicultural business program. And when Tom sent me the text, it was just like, wow, because I wasn't necessarily, I guess, looking for that text. And so I would say that it began with me working at the multicultural business program, which working there helped me become more aware of myself and the passions that I had within that what I feel like God gave to me. And then it went from, just a very simple conversation that I felt like I was having with God. And then the head coach of Madison Academy, literally the next week, he texted me and he asked me would I consider going back or coming back to Madison Academy. And so that's where it began. And I wanted to give you context for everything. So that's what I would say. That's where it actually began was at Madison, was at Michigan State, working
Mm,
with the multicultural business program.
yes. Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate how you laid that out because that
Yeah.
actually informs where I would like to go, which is
Hmm.
that being that you're from Huntsville, Alabama, and have the background of being a part of Madison Academy as a player, and now you're able to see it through a couple different lenses. I would love to know, and I think people who are listening will question, what was it like for you growing up there, and how did your faith come about? What is your family situation like? Take me all the way back to as you're beginning this journey in basketball
Hmm.
and in faith.
Yeah, so um, well, it began for me, I would say, seeing my parents, um, walk out their faith. And it's funny, I just had a conversation with another ministry that I'm a part of, actually the church that I go to. I just had a conversation with them. We did something similar to this. And so I was sharing my testimony and they asked me something similar. And what I said to them and what I would say now is that the first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to like my faith walk is New Zion Baptist Church. And so New Zion Baptist Church was the church that I grew up in, and it was a really not too big of a church. Everybody in the church, we were all related. So um, faith has always been a part of my family, and going through, I guess, the or being a part of that church, but then also that church basically being a part of my family, it just it just gave me, I guess, more of an organic, like, um it gave me more like an organic, like, feel when it came to faith. Even though there were things that, as I progressed in my faith journey later on, that I learned that I may not have learned at that point in my life when I was young, but at the same time, it was like faith it was a part of my family. It wasn't something that was foreign to my family. It wasn't something that was, not communicated in my family. It was just an everyday, it was an everyday thing. And when I say thing, not to minimize our walk with Christ, what I'm saying is just it was just like, oh, if somebody has a sister and it's not foreign for them to wake up in the morning and say, hey, how you doing? That's kind of how faith was to me. It was just really familiar to me, if that makes sense. And so my faith journey began with actually seeing my family walk it out, and then me personally saying, hey, this is something that I feel like God is calling me to walk out personally as well. And so um, it started there. It started in my family when I was about 6 years old, was when I actually decided to give my life, or to give the life that God gave me back to Him, and began to walk out that more intimate journey. And then as I progressed on in my faith walk, I developed mentors, and I've came into relationship with different people to help me grow. And so I would say my faith started with my family, but then also basketball started with my family as well. So my father, he played at the University of North Alabama, and then my mother, she also played, I think, at a community college. Um, she played at a community college in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and I'm not able to remember the community college right now. But then she ended up going to the same college that my father was going to, which was UNA, and so both of my parents played basketball. Um, my uncles played basketball, and so basketball was also another thing that was just a part of my family. Like, literally, I was just having a conversation with my parents. I think it was maybe like my parents and my sister, maybe about like 2 days ago. And my dad was talking about how he was a graduate assistant, after he got done playing basketball at UNA, and how he would hold me on the sideline when he was coaching the team. So like I've always just been around it. My grandma always tells the story of when I'm born and how some of my dad's teammates were there when I was
Mm,
born. So basketball was
nice.
just like it was there as well.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think like that last piece to it that you mentioned about being held on the sideline, that that resonated with because that just I think
Okay.
illustrates how deeply rooted it was and how
Yeah.
from that young age that's what your steps will be. And so I was like when you said that I took a second and thought about, wait, what is he telling me right now? He's being held on the sideline as a young kid. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think your story and a lot of what the public per se knows about it is that
Hmm.
there were significant highs in the game as well
Hmm.
as some lows to go along with it. And I think any high major any athlete period would be able to say that, would be able to say I had highs in the game and I had lows. But I say that because I would like to understand, and I think what you've done better than a whole lot of people who are spoken about. And I think it's so touching to me is that your chapter and your life after basketball is not done. In fact, it's just beginning. And that's something that
Hmm.
inspired me to reach out to you. But I say all of that because the thing I was reading today was that at 12, was it? You were at a football camp and came down with an illness. Am I
Hmm.
getting that correctly?
Yeah. I was playing. Yeah. I was actually doing like tour days
Mm,
for
okay.
my middle school football team. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So you
And
got it. You right there.
okay, okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I say that because later on there would be the hindrance in college with leg injuries and such.
Hmm.
And so I was wondering, is like, are those events that you look at and say those were catalysts for faith growth? Or how would you break
Hmm.
that down? The trial and the tribulation of being a highly functioning athlete who experienced uh, that shakeup and that change as early as 12. What did those events, the two separate ones, do for you, and how did you grow through that?
That's a really good question, Brian. And I would say the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about my first, I guess, challenge or hardship with meningitis, because meningitis was what I was I was diagnosed with when I was fighting for my life, and I just remember when I was in the hospital and laying down on the hospital bed. I just remember like asking my mom, was I going to die? Because I actually had a cousin whom I've never met. I never met him, but he actually died from not bacterial meningitis. He died from a form of meningitis. So I think it's viral meningitis and then there's bacterial meningitis. I'm not sure which one he passed away from, but he had meningitis and he actually it took his life. And actually my middle name was his first name. And him and my father, before my dad went to the University of North Alabama, he went to Motlow State with him, and they were actually really close. And my dad was actually at school with my cousin, whom I never met, who I have his middle name, when he passed away. So he passed away when he was 19 years old.
Mm,
So meningitis wasn't something that was foreign to my family. And that was one of the reasons why the doctors ended up testing me for meningitis was because my grandmothers, excuse me, my grandmothers and my aunts, they were saying that, hey, you should test him for meningitis because they had seen my cousin LeByron passed away from meningitis. And so I remember, I guess, seeing like the severity of the situation and also feeling like the physical pain and the physical discomfort. Like I had a fever up to 103, I think, and I was hallucinating. I couldn't eat much. I had like these terrible migraines to the point to where my mom, she would have to massage my head like almost all day if I was up. And so like seeing, I guess, being a part of like that physical pain or that physical discomfort, seeing the seriousness of it because like all of my family was coming to visit me and seeing all of that, experiencing all of that, it just led me to ask the question like mom, am I going to die? And it was really serious. And I just remember like feeling like I heard God's voice. And I felt like what God said to me was that I had more life to live and that it wasn't time for me to leave the earth. And, I think hearing that, it just gave me a sense of like confidence and comfort. And there have been certain moments in my life where I go back and I'm like, did I really hear that? Did I really feel like, God said that to me? Or it's kind of like what you were talking about with the podcast, right? Where it's like before we got on air, but just how you were just saying, like the conversation that we were having, it just gave you more confidence and more assurance that this is where we're supposed to be. This is what we're supposed to do. And so it's like a lot of times, man, like God gives us these clear signs and he communicates to us in very clear ways. But our doubts and our uncertainties that really doesn't come from him, but they don't come from him. It just comes from, our experiences and the things that we've maybe been through in our lives that try to cause us to not continue to believe, that try to stop us from believing. Um, and so like I've been through moments in my life where I've just thought like, man, did I really hear that? Like what? But I just keep getting that assurance that, this was something that was what I heard and I'm living it out now. Like I literally just had a conversation, like I said earlier, I had a conversation about my testimony. And then after my testimony, a lady came up to me and she shared with me how she was actually she was a part of the first cohort to give out vaccinations for meningitis, and she was giving me a layout of meningitis and how serious it was. And she was just saying like she was very adamant on me knowing that you are a miracle because
Mm,
even people who survive it, a lot of times they lose limbs, like they have some kind of like vision impaired, like their vision is impaired in some way possibly, or their hearing could be impaired in some way possibly. But like none of that has happened. I don't have any of those issues or those challenges. And so I just think it's, that challenge or that hardship, like going back to the question that you asked earlier, I think what it did was it just drew me closer to how much, God loves me and how much he cares for me and how he's literally always for me and fighting for me. And he wants good things to happen to me. And
mm,
I think sometimes like we have these different questions that come up in our head when we see just the negative things that happen that take place in our society and our everyday lives, and we just wonder, like, is there really a good God? Like, is he really good? And I would say my experiences, particularly with my meningitis, when I was 12, it shows me that there is a good God, and he does have so much love for me to experience. And I think th- I think going through that situation when I was 12, it laid a good foundation for me when I went through my highs and lows at Michigan State. So it was like when I went into Michigan State, I wasn't foreign to one hardship, but also at the same time two, which is shit probably is the biggest thing that I think we all need to be connected. The biggest relationship or the greatest relationship that I feel like we all need to have is a relationship with the Heavenly Father. And so because I'd already been through that and I've when I was 12, my relationship with him was it was just something that I automatically leaned back into when I went through those those hardships that you talk about, like with my injuries um and I think going through those hardships at Michigan State, it draw me even deeper into understanding um who I how much God loves me and also who I am in him outside of what I do. And so I think it's very easy when it comes to being a high level athlete to feel like I have to I have to meet all of these requirements. I have to meet all of these expectations. I have to am I going too long? Am I answering this question too deeply?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
I was immersed, and I believe this
Okay.
is exactly where people will be at when this releases. So, yes,
Okay.
I
I just
love
don't
what
want
you're
to keep rambling or keep talking. So I hope I'm not rambling. But what I was saying is like it, you talk about how one of the ways that you heard about Michigan State was through um, the recruiting class that I was a part of, right? Didn't you say that?
yes,
Okay, so like, you know, as an athlete, you have all of these different expectations. People are they see you as, somebody that almost is you're almost like considered like a demigod in so many ways, or like this, this superhero. And I asked that question about, or I brought up how you understood or you heard about Michigan State through the class that I was a part of, because as an athlete, it can be a lot of pressure put on you when people they they get to experience who you are through what you do. And because sometimes it isn't always communicated in a healthy way that what you do doesn't have to define who you are, that pressure can become real. And so when you have highs, you're like super high because again, you're identifying with what you do. And in your mind, you're thinking that, hey, you know, let's say Bryan, for example, Bryan, he recognizes me because of like me being a quote unquote really good Michigan State basketball player. And so if I'm doing really well as a Michigan State basketball player and Bryan is hearing more about me and and my coaches are saying I'm doing a good job and the media is talking to me after the game and I'm getting a lot of attention. So like if I'm getting all of that because I'm doing a lot of good things and I'm at like this all-time high because I'm doing a lot of things. Well, when I don't do a lot of good things and nobody says anything about me, or if I don't have time with the media because we lost, or if I get a DM from somebody that's a Michigan State fan and they're talking terribly to me because I missed maybe the last shot of the game that I usually make. Um, I'm all the way here now, and I'm feel like I'm way below uh, the quote unquote expectation bar, and so because of that, I like vacillate so much as a person, emotionally and mentally. And so when I went through my injury, I'm saying all this to say, when I went through my injuries, it was like I was at an all-time low because no longer was I able to do good things on the basketball court to get people to recognize me or to see me. No longer was I able to do things that I felt like made me quote unquote good enough in the eyes of other people. And so when I went through my injuries, what it did was it caused me to have to be okay with knowing and continuously growing, coming into this understanding that no, I am, I, I am, I am good enough. I am good enough. Like, no, I'm not good enough because I'm not doing and I'm not being seen and I'm not on the court and I'm not a quote unquote a part of everybody's blog post or tweet because I did something spectacular in the game. Just because I'm not a part of that, it doesn't mean that I'm not good enough. And so I think going through my highs and lows at Michigan State, what it did was it just really helped me um, just see how much I do not need to, or let me put it like this: going through my injuries helped me. It was the beginning of me breaking out of like this prison of performance, feeling like I always have to perform to like be noticed by people.
Mm. Oh my gosh. I had never heard a lot of those thoughts shared that way. And so immediately I want to say thank you for speaking at length because and don't worry
Hmm.
about rambling. This is a show where I want to uncover things. And
Yeah.
so I thank you uh, for that. And one of the kind of ideas I had about our show today was that
Hmm.
we would stay away from covering basketball as much as we could. And I
Hmm.
think, for a lot of what you said, which is that with basketball comes people worshiping what I do, not who I am.
Hmm.
And that's such an
Hmm.
important thing that I want to drive home for anyone listening or anyone who would potentially be interested in coming on the show. But there is one thing that I wanted to ask you about, which is related to hoop, which falls in line with what you were
Hmm.
saying, which
Hmm.
is my understanding is you were the classification player of the year in Alabama each of your years of being on the high school team. And
Hmm.
I say that because think about what we're saying, folks. He's at a point where it's a low of the low at 12 and has to pivot and is given the strength to pivot to at 14, as early as 14, win this type of award and earn this type of recognition at the next stage, and then do it again and again and again and again. And so, my
Hmm.
question to you, Josh, in that sense is how was it to pivot from where you were at 12 with the struggles and the new understandings, and then transition into an area where you were playing at an elite level? All of these schools were on your line, and you were
Hmm.
garnering this support and attention. What did it take to be at that level, to sustain that? And how did you navigate all of those decisions that were being made about who to sign with and what brands to wear and all these different, capacities? I'm so curious to know what was going on in your mind as being a young kid at that point.
Yeah. Um, it's crazy because when my dad, so I didn't say this, but I said now. So when I was going through the meningitis bout, my dad was actually he had actually deployed to Iraq, and he didn't deploy as like a he deployed as a government worker, so wasn't like in the military or the army, but Um, he was just there, it was a contractor job, so he just got a chance to go out there and just get more money. So nevertheless, he wasn't there when I went through um, the meningitis bout, which was another hardship because my father is somebody was at that time and is somebody now that is very involved in our family. So that was challenging within itself. But nevertheless, when he came back, he was like, "Man, what are you standing on?" Because since he had left, and from the time that he had left, from the time that he came back, I grew, and then even that following year, really not that following year, going into probably the next few months, the months after I got meningitis, I was able to play middle school basketball. And so it was like, when I'm saying all this to say, it was like I never was sick. It just, my the way I was playing, it's like it was almost like I went through a hardship, but like after the hardship, I got better. I grew physically. I was able to be on the court, and I was able to play as if I never was sick. And so, I mean, it was just amazing to see that turnaround. And so then from that middle school season till I would say probably about a year or so after that middle school season, I actually ended up transferring to the school that I graduated from, the high school that I graduated from. So I didn't originally, the middle school that I was a part of, I didn't originally, or the middle school that I was playing at the time, like right after I got sick, wasn't a part of like the, it wasn't a part of the high school that I ended up graduating from, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm,
And so Madison Academy which is the school that I work at now, is a K through 12 private school. So I ended up transferring into that school. When I
mm,
transferred, I ended up getting put back a grade because they felt like the shift in the curriculum and what was being taught there may be a little bit challenging for me. So I ended up getting put back a grade. And so when I went to Madison Academy, I got put back into the seventh grade. Or I did the seventh grade again. And so that meant I had to sit out. That meant that I had to sit out 1 year before I could actually play any kind of basketball at Madison Academy. But when I got to Madison Academy, I was actually playing. I was practicing with the high school team. Um, but I think that from the time that I got sick until you talk about me being at 14 and doing, getting the the 3A Player of the Year and things like that. From the time that I got sick to like 14, that was like a really big, like that was a really pivotal time, I think, in the transition of like, just maybe being a basketball player that was known a little bit around the the city to like just almost like being being known in the US, because around that time I actually started playing with a team from Louisiana, and that was the first year after I played that summer with them, because I'm now referring to summer basketball. After I played summer basketball with them, that was the first year that I got ranked nationally, because they do rankings. I mean, from like second grade all the way to like high school now, which is crazy. That's a totally different conversation. But nevertheless, I ended up getting ranked, I think like maybe top 5 or something in my class when I was 12 or 13. And then I made the transition to Madison Academy, and then like I'm playing with the high school team. I'm not able to play with them, but I'm practicing with them rather. And like I'm coming into my own as a basketball player, and I'm seeing how good I actually am, and I'm noticing, like, man, I can actually like no, I'm actually good at basketball. And so like it was almost like from that time I was sick to 14 years old or 15 years old, it's like things just changed drastically for me when it came to basketball. And I started playing with a team out of Atlanta, the Atlanta Celtics, and that was another like confidence booster for me as a basketball player. And so when I go into high school, when I go into my eighth grade year, this is the year that I'm actually able to play high school basketball because you can play up to 5 years of high school basketball in Alabama. And so I'm playing as actually no, it's six, I think, because my sister actually played when she was in seventh grade.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So I'm playing, and man, it's just like I have a different confidence level. Even though I had challenges with confidence and like feeling the pressure of like, being trying to live up to a certain level or a certain status that people have put me at such an early age. That was like I can look back on it now and say that was hard to try to manage, but also at the same time I can see how as a player it was building my confidence as well. So it was like this, it's like two worlds at play internally where, I'm trying to work through these expectations that people are putting on me and feeling like I need to prove myself and remain at this certain level or this certain status that has been given to me. But then also at the same time, it's like, it's giving me a different confidence in the talents that God has given me because I'm like, whoa, like I'm in eighth grade, I'm playing high school basketball. I get player of the year in the area. And so it's just like these two worlds at play.
Mm, yes, absolutely. And I just I think what's remarkable to me is how you were able to stay collected and driven and doing this deep work
Hmm.
and then end up making the selection. I want to advance forward a little bit from high school to deciding to come to Michigan is that I really appreciate the in-depth capabilities that you have and the way of your refined ability to share. And I think that this is going to be one that resonates with those who listen. But
Hmm.
I want to continue on the trend we were going on, which is that you kind of spoke a little bit about managing what happened in high school and
Hmm.
working your way through from eighth grade to senior year. And so I want to drop us right down into where you've made the choice to go to Michigan State and you're sitting alongside the likes of, and by the way, folks, we're not trying to do a name drop here, but it's a little bit hard to avoid that when speaking about this class because it's positioned uniquely within the history of really what I would say is the sport of collegiate basketball as a whole. But it's you positioned
Hmm.
alongside Cassius Winston and Miles Bridges and also Nick Ward. And
Hmm.
I would love to know and hear your perspective on what that was in terms of coming together as a group, some of the conversations that you had when you were beginning there about wanting to be great and wanting to take it to the next level, and then
Hmm.
what it was like for you being a part of that, being a part of the university here and trying to grow and make it work at such a high level with these tremendous players and
Hmm.
teammates.
Yeah. First of all, like those guys they were unbelievable athletes, and they still are unbelievable athletes. Like Cassius Winston, Miles Bridges, like you said, Nick Ward. I mean, that was just a great class to be a part of. And I think, man, I do think it was just a lot of expectations placed on us, um, coming into our freshman year of college. And I mean, it was so much so that they called us like the class. Like I remember we were called the class, and there were like shirts with our names on the back of them. And so it was just, it was just, it was, I think internally, it was scary for me because, and I don't think at the time I really had words to be able to communicate how I was feeling emotionally. Um, but like when I look back on at my time then, like going into Michigan State, being a part of the class, like having the expectation of being like this great being a part of this great class of athletes that can actually bring some very um, very influential play to the Michigan State basketball team.
Mm,
I just think about like that was like scary for me. And then on top of that, you put that with, me moving away from my hometown, and I'm 9 to 10 hours away from where I've grown up my whole life. I'm in a place where I don't really know anybody for real, except for, the teammates that I've met on my visits and the coaching staff. So really, I really only have a good at this time, I only have a good grasp on like the basketball team when it comes to my relationships. And relationships are very important because relationships, they can actually give you a peace. I think God uses relationships that, to give you a certain peace, where you can be at ease. And that's one of the biggest challenges sometimes, where it's like you go into this new place. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, not just as a student athlete, but as a student in general. When you're going into college, you want to figure out where you fit in, who is your circle, who can you become close with,
mm,
working, like, who's your tribe, right? And so just the normal, you have the expectations that a student will have of like, wanting to make sure that they do good in school, and then their own inward or internal expectations of like, or desires rather, not maybe expectations, but desires of, okay, who I need somebody to be with. I need a community to be a part of. Um, and then you also have the fears of being in a new place. And so I had, the fears of, being in a new place or like at least those concerns rather that any student will have. Um, I had the desire or the concerns of like, okay, where am I going to land in terms of, my purpose within, even though I was going in as a basketball player or as an athlete, you still think about, okay, where do I fit in? How can I really fit in at Michigan State? And then also you just have like the transition of being away from home or transitioning from home into a state that is like 10 hours away from where you live. Then you add in the fact that, okay, everybody's like, they're talking about you um, from this standpoint of, like you're part of this class that's going to like change, really bring impact into the Michigan State basketball program. The Michigan State basketball program, they just got done, making that run too the year before with Denzel, or they didn't make the run. I think we lost to Middle Tennessee State, right? And so that was somewhat of a letdown. And then we had our freshman season. And then our freshman season was just like, I think internally it was like, when I say internally, I think within the program, I feel like Coach Izzo, he always expects us to be at our best. But also, I think internally, it was just kind of like, hey, we don't want to be unrealistic with what we can achieve. Like the goal is always to win a championship. The goal is always to make it to a Final Four. The goal is always to be a runner in the Big Ten, but also at the same time, it was kind of like, we had ended up losing some of our bigs that we had expected to have that year. So that put more emphasis on using Nick Ward. And then you had four freshmen that ended up being like the starters for the team at the time. As talented as we were, we had never played in, we never played in Big Ten basketball, which is it's like a totally different beast. And so you have all these different factors at play. And I think internally, like in the program, everybody was just Coach Is had a lot. I feel like he had a lot of patience with us,
Mm,
because he had been around. He's been around the block so many times, and he just understands dynamics. And I think he had more of a long term mentality in so many ways. I feel, and as a player, you don't always see it that way because you're just like, man, we're supposed to be good now because everybody is saying we're supposed to be good now. So if we
mm,
aren't good now, or quote unquote, doing the things that everybody's saying that we should do, if we aren't doing it now, then that means, we didn't, we weren't successful. Now, I'm not going to say that it was our goal to play like the way we did, but I also can see, I feel like with everything that took place with that team, the dynamic of the team, like our freshman year, I think as a class, I think we were successful because we developed, we matured, we grew, we learned. And so it was really cool to be a part of, that class and be a part of, I guess that first freshman year that isn't always easy, but we got through it and we learned.
yes, yes. And I think, that's something that will live in your mind, in all of your minds, of that growth that
Hmm.
took place and that
Hmm.
understanding that you guys were able to work through some of those fears and pressures, uh,
Hmm.
to move on for the whole run. And I think that's what's so important to glean from what you just said, is that what you feel at the beginning won't always be the way that you feel and the way that you're operating. And like it will start
Hmm.
to loosen up a little bit.
Hmm.
But I was curious, is like now after you've been removed and flash forward to now, right? Is how often do you think about what happened as a player there, about the legacy, about all those guys? Is that something that you communicate about often? Is that something that you think on? I was wondering kind of what has it left imprinted on your mind as you're going through your journey today?
It's a question that, I mean, I often get asked about my journey at Michigan State. And, I think in so many ways, God uses that as I guess, an avenue for me to be able to communicate truth to people that are really, I guess, into the basketball scene and into Michigan State, and
Hmm.
they're they're fans. They're just fans of basketball in general, and so often I have, like, just maybe, I think it was yesterday, we had a game out of town, and I ended up being able to have a conversation with a father and a son because they were asking me about, basketball, and they were asking me about Michigan State and what it was like being able to play under Coach Izzo. And it was like a very brief moment, so I couldn't really go in depth with them
Hmm. Yeah.
about everything. But I always try to take those opportunities, as a chance. I always try to take those opportunities as a way to communicate to athletes and, I guess, mentors or parents of the athletes that, man, one, don't go so fast or don't try to get so uh don't get so fixated on the destination or the goal that you miss out on the journey and the process. Because I think a lot of times when people ask me about Michigan State, I think a lot of their questions are coming from this place of, oh, this is a place where I want to get to. And so because I want to get to that place, let me communicate to somebody who's been to that place, which isn't a bad thing at all. I think that is a I think that's wise because I think people can give you like people who've gone before you, they can give you in minutes what maybe have took them years to figure out.
Mm,
So I think that's a very wise way of going about development, but also at the same time, I always try to communicate to people that ask me questions about my career and about Michigan State and Coach Izzo and all of those things. I always try to communicate that, man, hey, just embrace where you are right now. Like if you really take advantage of everything that you have in front of you, everything that has been placed within your reach, and you do it to the best of your ability, the destination will take care of itself, like the end goal or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, you will get there. And the reason why I always communicate that, or I try to communicate in a bunch of different ways, is because I think when I look back at my career, going back to your question, I'm still going to try to answer your question. I know I sometimes go all these, but I have a place I'm trying to get to. But
yes.
going back to your question, I think for me, when I think about my career, I often think about how I had so many monumentous moments in my life, not just you asked me about Michigan State, but I'm just thinking about basketball in general. Not just not just in Michigan State, but basketball in general. It's like I had all these monumentous moments, but I was so focused on trying to be the best that I could be that I didn't embrace the moments when I actually displayed and demonstrated that, if that makes sense. So like let's
Mm,
say for example, you have the final four. I got a chance to be a part of a Final Four. And I didn't get to play in the Final Four, but I got to be a part of a team that made it to the Final Four. And, that would be an example of me being a part of a team that actually got a chance to experience the fruit of them being their best. Like we made it to a place in the tournament where we were considered to be four of the best teams of one of four teams that will be considered to at the time to be like the best in college basketball. Like that is a very monumentous moment. And I think as an athlete, because you're always trying to fixate your mind on performing well and doing well and trying to, okay, I got to this place, now I need to get here. I'm never satisfied. I'm never content. Sometimes you get so caught up in that cycle that you forget about those monumentous moments and you don't embrace it and you don't let it like you aren't engulfed in it. You aren't breathing it in. You aren't where your feet are you aren't where your feet are planted.
mm,
And so you're there, but you're not there because you're thinking about trying to perform at a high level. And so that thought process of trying to perform at a high level, it takes you out of the present moment and you miss out on the fact that you did actually do what you were trying to do. Like you practice, you worked on the shot, you worked on the plays, you watched the film, and it worked. But you're so focused on like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I got to do this. I got to, but and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's over, and you didn't really get a chance to like you were there, but you really weren't there.
mm.
if that makes sense. And so a lot of times I think about that, I think about how important it is to, like, there's a Latin phrase that people use called carpe diem. It's like seize the day. And
Mm,
so I just think about how important it is to, when I think about my career, I learned how important it is to seize moments within my career and embrace the moments and like take my time and not be so focused on just trying to be the best to the point, like, to a fault, to the point to where I don't actually, enjoy the fruit of the labor that God helped me to uh to like put forth. And so I always, when I think about my career, that's one thing that comes to my mind. Um, I guess to say that's one thing that I learned from my career when I think about my career, and then I try to communicate that to other people when they ask me about my career, because it's just, it's just so hard, man, to not get caught up in, that cycle of like performance.
mm, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for classifying and categorizing all those different thoughts and perspectives. And you know, I would like to try something out if you don't mind. That
Okay.
is kind of a new type segment I want to bring to the show, which
Okay.
is called skipping stones. And
Okay.
so when I talk about or when I think about skipping stones, the reason I want to bring this in is to kind of highlight a few important concepts, but in short, digestible, more digestible, I should say, frame of mind, where it's like a quick hitting question, quick hitting answer. And
Hmm.
so kind of like a rapid fire type thing that you'll
Yeah,
see
yeah.
on, any show. And
Hmm.
skipping stones to me fits with the concept of living water, right? And skimming the surface, right, of the living water. So I wanted to keep that
Hmm.
connected to our overall
Okay.
like symbolism message. So
Okay.
this is Skipping Stones with Bryan Rector and Joshua Langford. Let's start out here, Josh. Is how would you describe Coach Izzo?
I would describe him as a leader amongst leaders.
Mm, mm. What is one way when you were playing that was, or even now, let's open up the entire spectrum of time. What is
Okay.
one way that you like to get away from the grind of work, whether it was playing hoop back then, or coaching now, or teaching? What is one way you like to escape, and one way to use your free time?
One way I like to escape, well, there's multiple ways, but I'll give you like a few. I like to watch Disney Plus um, with my wife. I like to go on walks, and I like to read books.
Mm, tremendous,
Yes.
tremendous. I think we've talked about the steps a little bit after career, which I would like to jump into here after this segment. But the question I'm curious about is, what is the key message, if you have one, that you like to share with the student athlete or the student you're advising, just the youth, I guess? What's your message that you are individual in that you like to drive home?
You are good enough.
Mm, mm.
As simple as that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one more, and then we'll move on because I got a couple
Okay.
more questions for
Okay.
you. Is if you could see any place in this world in terms of a location,
Hmm.
where would you go and why?
I would say Israel. The reason why I want to go to Israel is because that's where Jesus walked. I mean,
Mm,
I want to be able to experience where, where he lived, where he walked.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for being a part of Skipping Stones with Bryan Rector on Confluence of Worlds. But Mr. Langford, thank you for your time. There are a couple more areas I'd like to touch on, if that's okay with you.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm good with it.
So I was thinking, we've covered kind of the trajectory of high school to college, and then we talk about the steps that you've made since you've been outside of playing the game and being in this kind of developmental period of high school, college, your own education on a formal level. So I was
Hmm.
wondering, it's like one of your first steps was to be a part of Big Ten Network and be an
Hmm.
analyst and do things on that side. I was wondering, what
Hmm.
was that like for you, and how did you get into that side of things?
Man, bro, it was very, it was, I got, it was very nerve-wracking, like in the beginning stages of it, of
Mm,
communicating on television, because, I was just like, because I just got thrown into it in so many ways. I had a tryout. I did pretty good on the tryout. I mean, I was really raw, but I mean, you could see that I had potential, and there was. I just had. I could. You could see that it could be something that I could do. As I practice and things of that nature. So when I had the tryout, I mean, that was pretty much the only other time that I got a chance to practice on air before I actually got on air, if that makes sense. So I had to try out. That was like the practice I got on air because like basically the tryout is you sit, like you're sitting with um, another analyst and you basically do a mock segment. And so that's basically what you do. And so I did that, right? And then outside of that, the next time I actually did something in that space or in that environment in that way was when I was on television. So, and I mean, I would practice by myself. I would practice at home and, I would practice, but it was just really, I was just nervous. Like I was so nervous internally now. I don't know if that was seen outwardly or externally, um, but I was nervous. And I just remember like I would be in the room, in the dressing rooms, going over my stuff and just, man, just asking God for help. Like, I was just so like, oh my gosh, like this is it's so new to me. Um, and yet also at the same time, it was such a great experience because, I was able to, learn a different way of how to communicate. Um, I was able to, create some really good relationships. I was able to not just with the people on air, but the people off air, um, the cameraman. I was able to travel to Chicago and be able to experience Chicago, and because I was in the studio and I lived in Michigan at that time, and because I was still working for the multicultural business program while I was doing that as well. So I was able to travel to Chicago. I mean, it was just a lot of good experiences that I was able to develop, throughout that opportunity. And so it was a great opportunity. And I was glad I was able to be a part of it. But it was it was in so many ways like very, very nerve wracking. But then after a while I got more comfortable. I got used to it. And I started just internally I became more comfortable, with being on air and talking about the game. But I think after some time it began to be a lot for me, personally. working full time at Michigan State, and then also trying to work with the Big Ten Network and doing the, going back and forth and traveling, and it was a lot. And so I just felt like, hey, I think, I want to make a pivot, and it wasn't that what I was doing with the Big Ten Network was not exciting and not a great experience for me, but also I just started to really think about, okay, what is the healthiest thing for me, in terms of going back and forth and traveling, and what would be a kind act towards my body and my
Mm,
emotional and my mental health. Because I
yes.
think sometimes, bro, we can be so excited for opportunities, and we can be so excited to take on the new ventures that are put in front of us, that we can sometimes just forget about, okay, how is this going to impact me physically? How is this going to impact me emotionally? How is this going to impact me relationally? How is this going to impact me financially? I think sometimes we jump straight to financially. I think it's,
Mm,
it's often easy for us to do it that way, but I want to think about the other areas of our lives. And, even at that time, I was beginning to start being in a relationship with my now wife. And I wanted to have more time to spend with her. I wasn't able to spend as much time as I wanted to. So I would say my time with Big Ten was like a really big learning experience that I'm so glad I was able to get, because I learned and I just made some good relationships too.
mm, yes, absolutely. And I think you are so right in the sense that there are so many different, we talked off camera about
Yeah.
the mountains, right? The concept of growing in areas. And
Hmm.
I just think that really speaks to me, that piece about being sacrificial with your time and giving up something that was growing to focus on what's happening at home. And I so appreciate hearing that side of your
Yeah.
story as well. You know,
Yeah. Can I speak more to what you just said?
yes.
Yeah, so you just said something really good about knowing how to sacrifice, or knowing what needs to be sacrificed, because something has to be sacrificed. Like, it's just something has to be sacrificed when it comes to whatever it is that we're doing in life, or whatever it is that we're trying to, I guess, accomplish in life. I would say for me, when I was playing basketball, I sacrificed a lot of time with friends, or I sacrificed a lot of, in so many ways, um like, okay, I would say, for example, I'll give you an example. um I remember how when I was in high school, I would play, um or we would have, not play, we would have like family over for like events a lot of times. And so there was a certain point in the event that we would have as a family, where me and my dad, we would leave the family event, and we would go to the basketball gym, and we would like work out. And there would be certain times where maybe people in the family would be like, why are you doing that? Or there would be certain times where, did I lose you?
No, still here.
Okay. Okay, there'd just be certain times where um I didn't necessarily want to leave, but I still end up leaving. um there would be times where I may have wanted to do one thing, but then I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to the basketball gym. And so I sacrificed. And so that sacrifice, um, it brought a return on like the investment that I was willing to, that I put in. So I was better at basketball. I was more talented than a lot of my peers. Um, but that didn't come by just, it just didn't happen. There was it was something that had to be sacrificed. Now, would I say now that some of the things that I did then weren't the best sacrifice? Yes, I would say that. But what I also am saying is that, like, I think it's very important to understand, you know, that something has to be, something has to be, let go of, something has to be sacrificed. And I think even with when you talk about what you're trying to communicate through your podcast, um, when you think about faith and sports and community engagement, when you choose to go down those paths, it's just, it's going to require you to be okay with letting go. It's going to require you being okay with not maybe doing some things that everybody wants you to do, because when it comes to like community outreach, or when it comes to faith, not everybody always sees everything the way that you see it, and because of that, it brings, you know discomfort, because you have an opinion that you're trying to work through that somebody else has, when it comes to something that you believe in, and so I think that's just very important. And going back again to what you were saying about sacrifice, I think when it comes to wanting to do a lot of good things well in life, you have to be okay with making sacrifices. And I think also seeing the importance of what is important, and then what isn't important.
Mm, yes. Thank you for adding on. I like one, I appreciate that you asked me if you could add on,
Yeah,
but also like thank you for doing that because once
yeah.
again, I just feel like one of the reasons why I so love speaking to you is that there's just another wealth of knowledge that I think a lot of people, myself included, are growing and building.
Hmm.
But I love your perspective because in a lot of ways you've been there and done
Hmm.
the race that we are the kind of um, the demographic that I'm targeting are
Yeah.
getting into, right? And beginning
Hmm.
to do. So I love what you said there.
Hmm. Yeah.
You
Thank
know,
you for giving me the space.
yes, absolutely. There's one more thing that I want to get into, and
Hmm.
I think it's tremendously important to consider given the changes that have happened and the new kind of way we're trending in collegiate sports. And
Hmm.
that is the talk about the NIL space, the transfer
Hmm.
portal, all of these kind of what I've heard referred to as money grabs
Hmm.
or money games. People being curious about what value they can add to organizations and trying to capitalize on that while they can. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because it's been a buffer to helping athletes benefit if they are not going to the next level of the program, right?
Sure.
And that's a good, but there are a lot of ways that it's become, or there are concerns, I should say, about how much that changes drive and desire and work ethic and negative
Hmm.
reasons for wanting to grow who you are in terms of
Hmm.
like accruing more money
Hmm.
and fame and all of these you know kind of problematic experiences that one could have at
Hmm.
such a young age. So
Hmm.
I say all of that because I was curious what your perspective is being an athlete who came through at a time where it wasn't existing at the height it is now.
Hmm.
What do you feel about what has happened and about what the reception is and people pursuing these investments in themselves in the NIL space? What are your thoughts?
Man, you said a mouthful there with that question. I think I think it really begins with the student athlete having a really good grasp. Now, when I say this, I'm not saying that there is, I don't want to use the word perfect. I guess when I say this, I'm going to use the word perfect. I guess when I say this, I'm not saying that there is a perfect way of doing this, but also I do think there is um, an excellent way of doing this. And here's what I'm about to say, or here it is, what I'm going to say, and that is it begins with the student athlete being excellent and understanding who they really are. I believe that is the foundation for everything when it comes to NIL and maybe the different issues that may arise from NIL or the problematic perspectives that may take place when it comes to someone going down this journey of NIL. You know, it makes me like I don't know if you've seen this commercial, but when I was watching I think I was watching Alabama versus Michigan, and they had this transfer portal commercial. I think it was a Dr. Pepper commercial. I think it was a Dr. Pepper commercial. Anyways, it was some kind of soda commercial. And the football, it was like these football coaches, and they were losing their player. Uh, they were losing like their players to like this vortex, and it was like sucking up everything around them. And have you seen that commercial?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Is it a Dr.
Absolutely.
Pepper commercial?
It is. Yes, sir.
Okay. So they were basically losing their star quarterback to this vortex. And the guy, I think one of the coaches, he was trying to like, he was like, wait, no, this is our two-time I can't remember. He listed like so many accolades that the quarterback had helped them be able to achieve. He was like, we can't lose him. But then he wasn't able to I guess grab him because he didn't want to let go of his Dr. Pepper. Because the quarterback was like, hey, um, grab me with this hand. He was like, I can't. My Dr. Pepper's in his hand. And then the guy just gets sucked, the quarterback gets sucked into the vortex. And I feel like that commercial is almost a microcosm of the NIL space and how going back to what I said, I think it's very important for a athlete to be excellent in understanding who they are, because if an athlete is excellent in understanding who they are, they won't get sucked into that vortex. And then if you have a coach and a coaching staff who is excellent in understanding who they are, they'll be able to navigate the uncertainties that come with NIL. And you'll be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then this is what we're not going to do. Because, and, I have my Dr. Pepper in my hand, and I will not let go of Dr. Pepper. If you want to get caught into this vortex because you don't really, as a player, because you don't really understand, I guess, who you are, then hey, go ahead and do that. Um, so I think it begins with not just the player, but also the program really having a good grasp on what they believe in as a program, what is their vision, what kind of players do they want, and then not really budging on or conforming to these different fads that are going to rise because of NIL, um, and just standing firm and grasping and standing firm and establishing like, no, this is who we are. Because if you know who you are, um, you'll know who you aren't, And then because you know who you aren't, you won't get caught up in like the waves and the winds of everything that's taking place. But with that being said, I do think it's very important to really, put things in place for athletes to really get a better grasp on who they are and surrounding them with resources and um, placing them in conversations with other people who've gone before them that can like give them some insight to like, hey man, you need to like, you know, I don't even think it's really about NIL as much as it is about the student athlete just understanding their identity and having
Mm,
and having a good grasp on that.
mm,
Because like if you understand your identity, all the other things that may come and distract you or can possibly distract you because NIL first of all, NIL is a tool. So anything that is a tool can be used for good or it
yes.
can be used for evil. So when people ask me, is it bad? Is it good? I'm saying it's a tool that can be used for bad. It's a tool that can be used for good.
Mm,
And so when it's being used for bad, I think what protects the student athlete from being caught up in that is, like, or let me say it like this. I think a student athlete understanding their identity will it will actually be the catalyst for them to be able to use NIL as a tool of good and not a tool of bad, or a tool for evil, or a tool for a distraction, or a tool for a deconstruction of a team, or being poisonous to a program.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I think it really begins with the student athlete really, really being mentored in the aspect of identity. Because if somebody knows truly who they are, they they won't be they won't be controlled by the tool, i.e. NIL, but they will control the tool, which is what I'm talking in this context is NIL. So they won't be controlled by NIL, but they will control NIL.
Yes.
And so I think it really begins there. It doesn't begin with any because I think policies can be made for it, and people can put in infrastructure for it, but at the end of the day, structures and policies are for people. So if the people never really get a good grasp on who they are, then the policies, they don't really do much. The infrastructure doesn't really do much because an infrastructure with no people, I mean, what is it really like? What is it really doing? Because we use systems for so people can live better. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So I think it really begins with the student athlete and like the student athlete being on board with or seeing the value and understanding their identity. Then I think it goes from the student athlete to the people around the student athlete, like really putting things in place where the student athlete can understand more about themselves, which will help them be able to make better decisions, have good people around them that can give them good advice, make good decisions on like what path they're going down. And so I think that's where it really begins, Bryan. Maybe that's just my philosophy. I just see the value in a person really getting a good grasp on themselves because when you're when you're when you have a good grasp on who you are, I think it'll take care of all the other things around you because you can decide better.
Mm, mm, man. I love the way you left it with the discernment piece and that decision
Mm,
making ability that is so
yeah.
vital and can easily or more easily be obtained if there's a determination between who you are and who you aren't.
Hmm.
Man, thank you so much, Mr. Langford, for being a
Yeah.
part of our show and for adding a wealth of knowledge and wisdom to what we're trying to do here at Confluence of Worlds with Bryan
Hmm.
Rector. My final
Hmm.
thought before we jump off is is there anyone you'd like to shout out or anyone you'd like to acknowledge? And then also, if you would be okay with letting people know how they can connect with you.
Hmm. Yeah. So I would like to shout out my wife, and I would like to shout out my son. So my wife and I, we are expecting a little one. He will be here. He's uh, destined to be here. Um, April 22nd. That is the due date. So I want to shout out my wife and my son, my soon to be uh, son. So that would be my shout out that I want to give. And then people can follow me. They can follow me at Kingdom Thinker 7 on Instagram. I haven't really been on social media that much. I actually like took a break from social media. I tried to take like a break at the beginning of this year, and then a little bit of last year. Um, my plan is to start, getting back on slowly but surely. And I just think sometimes you just need that break, to protect your mind and let your mind just settle. Because even Instagram can be like that vortex.
Mm, mm,
If it's not the vortex that we talked about in the commercial, if it's
yes.
not used correctly, and if the person doesn't have a good grasp on themselves. But nevertheless, if people want to follow me, they can follow me at Kingdom Thinker 7 on Instagram. Um, yeah, that
Thank
would
you.
be it. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's it for us on Confluence of Worlds with Bryan Rector. I'm just so fortunate that we could jumpstart this 2024 year with really what have been back to back to back. I think a couple of the most influential interviews that I've been a part of or privy to in my life. So, Mr. Langford, thank you again for being here,
Yeah.
and hope you're enjoying seeing what's out there, everybody, on Confluence. And we have our social media available at Confluence World, and that'll be it for us today.